Hi everybody, it's Mark Kelly here. We'll be kicking off in a few minutes. We'll just give it a little while for everybody to log in. Just checking if anybody is having any issues with audio, just put the hand up please. Okay, we'll just wait another 2 minutes before we kick in. I think Ben, you've mentioned that you're having problems with audio there. Just wanted to check. You might want to try logging in perhaps using the 1-800 number. It should be in the webinar invite. If you're having any problems with your laptop or PC, just log in using 1-800 190 906, which is in the invite. There is an access code in there. If you key that in and put the hash code in, then you should hopefully be able to get around any issues with audio on your PC. Might just kick things off. Don't have the full list of attendees yet, but I'm aware of the fact that obviously people are time is very precious for people. So if you'll just excuse me for 1 second. Okay, so this webinar is actually going to be recorded, and there will be a link available to it, and I'll also upload it onto YouTube later on this afternoon when it's processed, so that people can go back and have a look at it quite easily. So my name is Mark Kelly. I'm with Cadgroup Australia. We're a platinum Bluebeam Revu reseller. And I'd just like to welcome everybody to the Bluebeam Revu Fundamentals webinar. It's going to be very fast-paced, so if you do find that there's anything that you sort of missed, then you'll perhaps want to go back and watch the video. Okay, so let's kick things off. Okay, so what is Bluebeam Revu? If you haven't actually had any exposure to it, what does product actually do, and who might be interested in actually using it? Well, in terms of who uses Revu, it's got a very wide range of different users, from architecture, construction, local government, legal. Effectively, Revu is a program that can appeal to basically anybody who uses PDFs at any level, which of course is something that all of us do. In terms of what Revu can actually do, it's a program that has a very, very wide range of different tools in it, which is a reflection of the fact that it's also used by a wide range of different people. So it's a program that at its basic level can be used to create PDFs, but it can also be used to edit those PDFs or edit existing PDFs. It can be used to add information to the PDFs in the forms of markups. So it could be written or visual information that you use to supplement what's on the PDF. And it can also be used if you wish to quantify what's on the PDF, so areas of things on the PDFs, could be heights of things. So if you want to, you can actually use it as a tool to measure off, take off quantities, areas, and so forth. And so for people who aren't primarily CAD users, who are actually trying to price things based on PDFs, it's a very, very powerful tool. It can also be used, if you wish, as a bit of a project management tool. So you can use Revu to manage document revisions and so forth. You can create stamps. You can create signatures on documents to show that a PDF or a set of PDFs has been approved. And it can also be used to assign tasks and statuses of items. So if you wish to, you can create markups or whatever on a PDF and actually assign a status. So that could be a status where it's incomplete, complete. It could be an RFI. It could be a status that actually assigns a task to a specific person. And as we'll see at the end of the presentation, there'll also be a bit of a look at how you can actually collaborate in real time using Bluebeam Revu as well. So I'm not going to go through this list of actual interface objects, because we will be looking at that during the demonstration. One of the things I will mention a few times during the presentation, though, is this idea of profiles. So what you can do is you can basically take a snapshot of any of your settings inside Bluebeam Revu. That means that you can reuse any tools that you set up, and it also means that you could propagate those settings throughout different people in your office. The idea is that when you set up all your tools, you can have consistency, so your dimensions, your markups will all look consistent across the office. It also means that there's efficiency, because people aren't having to reinvent the wheel every time they want to do a markup on a PDF. They can choose from the preset tools that you've already gone to the bother of making. So we're going to be looking at some of the different tools that are available when it comes to marking up and adding information. And one of them is the SNAPSHOT tool. So we'll have a look at that, how you can actually capture parts of a PDF and copy them around and manipulate them. We'll also look at the visual search, which is a very, very powerful tool which allows you to quantify items visually in your PDF or PDFs. We'll also be looking at what happens when you actually have new revisions of a PDF. So if someone has issued a new set of PDFs, of course, one of the challenges is understanding what's different between the different revisions. So Bluebeam Revu has two different tools which facilitate that. We'll have a look at those. And this collaboration thing that I mentioned, we'll have a look at Studio Sessions. Studio Sessions is a tool that's built into Bluebeam and allows you to collaborate across different platforms in real time. So it's a very, very powerful tool. You can have people, say, on an iPad using 4G. You can have people in the office on a desktop PC, and you can have people actually working in real time together on these PDFs. The idea is that not only obviously can you mark it up, but all of the markups are all stored, and you can keep a record of who made what actual markup, what comment or information was added by whom at any given time. So let's go to the demonstration, and I'll just fire up Bluebeam Revu. So just want to go through and have a look at the interface really quickly. As I said, there's lots of stuff to cover here, so I'm going to want to sort of keep going through very fast. And if you miss anything, then perhaps have a look at the video that's produced afterwards. So we've got a fairly conventional menu across the top, so you basically access pretty much all of the different commands in Bluebeam Revu through these menus. There is a bit of duplication in the sense that a lot of these commands can also be accessed through other parts of the interface. You've got the actual review menu item here. This allows you to control the preferences in the program and do administrative tasks and so forth. One of the things I mentioned before was profiles. Now, at the moment, this is if we just set this to quantity takeoff, you might note perhaps that the interface might change slightly. Let's just change it to something like Review Advanced, for example, and you can see that you've got quite a different interface there on that profile. So essentially all of the settings in the interface here are all being captured. We'll just change that back to quantity takeoff. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually, before I do anything, I'm going to take quantity takeoff profile. I'm going to make a copy of it, and I'm just going to just call that something like that. So anytime I make a change, I'm actually just going to go up here and save this profile, and I'll be saving into this profile here that I've generated. So you can take that profile, as I said, and you can disseminate that across your office. You can also store that profile on a central network location so other people can get to it. Okay, so we've got the menus, but we've also got toolbars, which are a bit like your sort of standard CAD. I guess you'd say old-fashioned CAD these days, or classic AutoCAD. The toolbars can be added to or removed from or hidden, I should say. So you can activate the file toolbar here, for example. You can drag those around to wherever you need them to be. You can also customize them. So if you go here, you can see that you can add or remove commands excuse me, from those toolbars. And anytime you make those changes again, if you just go here and just save the profile, that will store those locations and settings, customizations. Okay, now across the left here, we've got these panels. You can see that if I click on the icon there, that opens and closes them. And so we've got the file access panel here to start off with. This gives me the recent files. What I can do, if I've got a particular file that I'm working on, for example, I can right-click on that and pin it. So that will pin it to the list, and it will permanently be there until I unpin it, which could be handy if you need to keep coming back to a PDF that's somewhere on your network and it's hard to find. One of the other things I can do is create categories, and I can actually put things into these categories. So it's pinned, but it's also in a subcategory, which then allows me to organize my different PDFs, so I could pin things and categorize them by project, for example. So all the salient PDFs that are in a particular project could all be put together in a particular category. So what I'll do is I'll actually just open up a PDF here, and I will just open up this PDF. When I do that, you'll see that I get these thumbnails appearing. And from here, I can actually do a number of different editing commands. I guess you could say these are collating or distilling commands if you wanted to use the Adobe terminology. So this is all built into Bluebeam Revu. So it's a very powerful tool. So for example, I can insert a blank page, and then I can pick a sheet size, let's say A0 landscape. I can also pick from some preset styles. I'm going to insert that after the last page. Click OK. And so now I've got this new sheet here. Okay, so that's some of the things I can do. I can delete pages out of there. I can renumber them. I can also relabel the pages. Now, one of the cool things about this feature is if I've received, say, a 20-page PDF document like the of plan views and so forth, and they're just called page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, I can actually rename, and I can actually rename based on getting the program to actually look at a particular part of the sheet. So say, for example, I wanted to rename them based on this part here of the title block. I could get Revu to go through all the sheets, look at this particular part of the PDF sheet, and actually rename them based on that information, which is pretty cool. So there is actually what's called an OCR engine built into Revu, optical character recognition, and that uses that technology to figure out what the name of the sheet is. Okay, bookmarks. If you do have bookmarks already built into your project, then they will come. Into your PDF, they will come in, and you can actually add your own bookmarks. You can specifically set a location on a PDF or just a PDF sheet and give that an individual bookmark. This is the tool chest. We'll come back and having more of a look at this. But what we can do here is we can create some very specific tools that allow us to mark up the PDFs or add comments to the PDFs. And this is where we actually sort of automate the task of coming back later and actually adding markups. So I'll actually have a look at how this all works. When I've got an item selected, this is the properties panel, which shows me information about it, allows me to manipulate information. I've got the measure panel. We'll be coming back here and having a bit of a look at this also. You can create forms in Bluebeam, so you can actually create things like RFIs or whatever, or invoices, which have a number of different sorts of things like list boxes and radio buttons. We can add signatures. That could be just a simple signature that states that you've signed off on something. It might have a scan of your actual physical signature. You can also bring in digital signatures, which are encrypted. You can also, in Revu, we won't be going through this actually in this presentation, but you can get a whole heap of different PDFs and assemble them together in what's referred to as a set. And so what that will do is it will treat all of those different PDFs as one individual set, which means I can export them as one PDF. If a document gets updated, a PDF document gets updated, I can swap that out in the set. So that could be a very powerful tool for people who are working, for example, on plan PDFs, but also on specifications, for example. We've also got the search panel here. Now we could do a very simple text search, but we've also got this visual search, and that's going to be something that we'll come back and have a look at. And the last thing we'll look at here is the studio, which allows us to create a studio session and get people collaborating in real time. Now we've got the markups list down the bottom, so as I start adding comments and creating measurements, this will all get stored down here. So we'll kick things off, and we'll just zoom in a little bit here. And the first thing that I want to do is just have a look at these markup tools. So markup tools are really, I guess, a way of embellishing the information on a sheet. So I might just zoom in here, and I'll just create a very simple piece of text. Try that again. So I'll just call this instruction to contractor. Okay. So I can, at a very basic level, I can just create this markup here, and I can just type in some text for instructions to the contractor. But what we can do though is really leverage the power inside Bluebeam by doing things like this. First of all, we can just manipulate the visual style of it. So we can make a unique style for this particular markup that we're going to have. But then what we can do is we can actually add in a subject, okay? And what I might do actually is just change that. So now what we're doing is we're sort of using this a bit more intelligently. We're actually going to create a subject here called Instructions to Contractor. And you'll see that when I click here down in the markups list, that's now categorized that under its own subject called Instructions to Contractor. And then you've got the actual comments here, which the user can then enter in. So the idea being that we want to create a particular markup that's going to be used in our office anytime that we want to create an instruction to the to the contractors. Okay, so what we can do is in the tool chest is we can make a new tool set. I'll just add that one in, and I'll call this Review Fundamentals. Okay, just obviously you're going to give that a name that reflects what the actual topic is of the markup. So you can make as many of these as you want to. Now again, as I'm working through, when I'm setting this all up for the first time, I just want to save that off to the profile so it gets captured. So what I'll then do is right click here, and I'm just going to add this to the tool chest, and I'll just add it into that new tool set that I created. So from here on in, I can just replicate that if I want to, and then for each one of these I might say check dimensions. This one might say, check door width or whatever, and then I can place these wherever I need to. The other thing I can do is I can sort of go into this other mode. If I double click on that little icon there, that changes, and that sort of puts that into it doesn't use the preset sort of details. It really just lets me add in whatever information I want to, but it's still categorized underneath the Instructions to Contractor. So there's two different modes that you can use. You've got this mode here, which is called Properties mode, and then you've got Drawing mode, which is basically like a clone in Drawing mode. And we'll see that all of the markups have that same property. So just very quickly moving on. You can see there's quite a few here, different markups. I'm not going to go through them all. Just want to show you some of the ones that I think are really powerful that might be useful. So I'm just going to create a call out here, and I might call this check on site, for example. Now again, I can add, or I can manipulate the properties of this as I need to. So I can I can change the properties here. I might call this something like to check at next meeting, for example. You can see here that you've got statuses. So you've got all these different statuses. You can actually add to this if you want to. Again, you can manipulate the colors and so forth to give that a unique appearance. And then I can add that into my tool set. But before I do that, I'm actually going to do something here which is quite interesting. I'm going to right click on that markup, and I'm going to go here to Edit Action. Okay, so with Edit Action, this is quite interesting. What I can do is there's a number of different things that an action that I can add when the person clicks on this markup. So the first thing I can do is I can just tell it to go to some particular part on this sheet or a different sheet. I can create a hyperlink, which might open up a manufacturer's website and go to a web page. I can also open up another file. Now that could be a PDF, but it could also be a CAD file, for example. Now, if I were to do that, if the person were to click on the markup, then that will attempt to open up that CAD file using the native CAD program. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to do another option here, which is to use a place. So I'm actually going to create a place in this document, and this place will be down here. It'll be general notes, and I'll just call this general notes. So in a way, it's a bit like a call out in perhaps Revit, if you're familiar with Revit, where you can create a call out to another section of the documents. So what I've got here is this little symbol here. Now, if I click on that, boom, it takes me to that other section. Now, you can place as many of these callouts to that same place now as you want to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this and I'm going to right-click. And again, I'm going to add that to my tool chest. So you can see here now. So you can actually again, go to that mode where you're actually just replicating that exactly as it is, or I can go to this other mode here and place one and then add in the information. You notice though the hyperlink, that sort of hyperlink hasn't actually been added in as well. Okay, so that's a little bit about those types of markups. I just want to show you some of the other ones really quickly. I've got the highlight markup, which is pretty straightforward, and the pen one, which again is pretty straightforward. You can erase sections of that if you've done it as a multiple piece. So some of the other things, you've got these pretty basic tools. You've got line, you've got arrow. You can create arrows to things if you want to highlight them. You can manipulate the color, of course, and also line weights of all of these things. And you can also manipulate the actual arrow point at the end and the start. Okay, now you've also got polyline, and then you've got a dimension tool, which just allows you to just run off a dimension here and then add some text. So really, this is not intended to be an actual real dimension per se. This is more of just a notation to say to add some information that's a comment. Okay, so just going on with those markup tools, you've got the cloud tool, which is again pretty straightforward. You have a cloud and you can control the actual line style, line weight, and so forth. Again, if you were going through and making these up to be reused in your office, you would save that into your tool chest so you can reuse that. Other people can get access to it easily. There is also a Cloud Plus tool, which effectively is a cloud, but also has a comment already built into it. So you could also add some comments in there as well. And again, I could actually put comments in there as well. So really the subject is the bit that sort of categorizes where the markup sits, and then they've got the individual comments. They could be just a generic comment, or you can actually individually add comments in to those different markups. So you can see underneath here in the markups list, I can actually manipulate the different columns, or I guess if you were coming from perhaps the Revit world, you would refer to these perhaps as parameters or properties. And I can also make my own customized columns. These are actually customized parameters, and you can even create things like formulas in here as well. We won't have time to go through that, unfortunately, in this webinar, but there certainly is some scope to be able to do that. Okay, now the thing I wanted to look at next is this image tool. So if you were on site, for example, using an iPad, you can add in an image like so. So you can say image from file in this case, and then you just find a file that is applicable. Let's just see if I can actually find one. I did think I had one here. Oh well, I'll just use that one. Just scale it off as needs be. You can also crop that, so if you don't need the entire image, you can go crop image, and then you can just sort of grab the bit that you're interested in. Okay, so again, as with a lot of these markups, I can right-click and I can do things like create an action. So when the person clicks on that, that might open up another document, for example. So the level of the sort of layering of different commands in Revu can be quite, I guess, a little bit overwhelming when you start off. But like a lot of things that are very powerful, you are rewarded by investigating and experimenting to see what you can actually do. It does enrich what you're actually doing in the program. So one of the things I'm also going to do is just have a quick look at the snapshot tool. So I'll just zoom in here, and let's just say, for example, that I had I wanted to make a notation on here that the structural engineer might need to add a column, for example. It's probably not really something perhaps you might want to do, but let's just use that as an example. So I'll take a snapshot here, and then what I can do is I can paste that into another location like so, and I can also propagate that around. You can also manipulate the actual graphics itself, so we'll have a look at that. One of the interesting things that you can do too is you've got the arrow keys. You can actually use that to nudge objects around. In the properties here, I can change that from a transparent fill into a colored fill if I wanted to. That might be a way, for example, of just highlighting that you need to be aware of something, for example. So we can also add an action to that as well, for example. Okay, so I'll just zoom out a little bit. What I'm actually going to do is going to make a copy of that over here for the purposes of demonstrating something else. So I'll move that over. You can see that there's a number of different ways I can manipulate this object that I've pasted in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the scale. I'll come back and have a look at what I'm doing here in a second, why I'm actually doing this. I'll just create a rectangle around that. Okay. So let's come back to that in a sec and just have a look at that, why I've actually done that to demonstrate something. Okay, now if you're going to be measuring up things, quantifying what's in your actual PDFs, it's obviously pretty essential to work out what the scale is. Now, you might have received a PDF from someone, another party that you're confident is actually at a correct scale. In this case, I've actually received these PDFs from someone who's drawn this up in Imperial. So if I start marking things off, I'm going to have to actually calibrate that to figure out what the actual scale is. Now, because that's Imperial, it does present, it could present a challenge, but there is actually a little trick I'm going to show you here. first thing I'm going to do is calibrate. Now, because I've got a scale here, that's the perfect thing I can do to scale off to get an actual dimension. The other thing is that quite often an architectural plan, for example, will have grid lines, and there may be a dimension on the grid line, so that's a point of reference that you can use to scale off confidently. You can see that as I move around here that Revu is actually snapping to those graphics. So because it's telling me that's 16 feet, I'm just going to put in here that that's 16 feet. And I guess just as a sanity check, if I just go in here, I can see that that's 16 feet. But that's probably not necessarily all that useful because in Australia we don't operate in feet. So the little trick here is if I go to the measurement panel, I can change that, change it to millimeters. Now, if you wanted to go out and get go and grab your calculator, you'll actually see that that is actually correct. So that is 4.876 meters, 16 feet. And you can change the degree of precision and so forth if you want to change it to whole units. Okay, so that's how you would calibrate that. One of the things in 2019 is that in the thumbnails for each sheet, you'll see that it will show you the scale if it's set. If it's not set, it will alert you to that fact. The other thing in 2019 is that if you start to go and create one of these measurements, then the software will actually stop you and tell you that you haven't calibrated a sheet. So that's a very useful tool. So you'll see under the measured thing here, we've got a few different options. So we've got poly length, for example. So one of the things that would be very useful, I think, for people to be able to do is to use Revu to work out paths of egress, for example. So we actually use we can use the polyline tool to work things like that out. So if we've got a path of egress here, for example, and let's just say that's the end of it. So we'll click on that, and we'll go to the properties, and then we'll add something like, say, an arrow at the end and a circle at the other end. We can turn off the show caption, like so. We can also manipulate what actual captions get shown. Now up here, what we need to do is, again, to give some organization to this, is we need to put a category, so to speak, in, which is the subject, and then we add a label, and we might call this fire egress 1, for example. So then what I can do is go to the toolbar. Well, I don't actually need to open it. I can just do it from here. Right click and add to the appropriate tool chest. I'm going to add that to this one. And then you can see that when I go into this mode here, it's automatically copying. So I'll just change it to the properties mode, and then I can start to add in more fire egresses in here using those exact same properties. And that's got all the different properties there already. And you can also see that that's here in the markup list. If I just change the sorting here, you can see all the different types of markups that I've created. And I can actually select the markups here. I can delete them, for example, make copies of them from there. So this is actually, again, this is adding, I guess, clarity to what I'm actually doing in regards to the markup. It's actually sorting things out for me, categorizing them under the subject. So that's how you'd make a fire egress. I'll just continue on here. Again, we're sort of pushing for time, so I'm just going to keep going. You can create a perimeter measurement, which might measure around the inside. You can see, again, this is snapping. So I'll just hit enter to finish that. One of the interesting things I can do, though, is if I add depth to a perimeter measurement, like say 3 meters, that will also calculate the area. So it's actually very clever in the sense that obviously if I've got a depth on a perimeter, then the software knows that that's actually will actually calculate the area for me as well. Okay, moving on, we've got the area tool, which allows me to generate areas. And again, this is something where you might want to, after you've done this once, you might want to capture this in a tool set. So I'm just actually going to hold the Shift key. You notice that when I hold the Shift key, a bit like AutoCAD, it snaps to orthogonal. So that's just a generic sort of measurement there. Again, you could call this for finish, and we'll label this particular one as tiles 200 to 200. We might give that a fill, and then we can give it a hatch pattern. You can actually define your own hatch patterns in here. If I turn on the highlight, you'll see that that stops that from masking whatever's beneath it. And again, I would go in and add that into the appropriate tool set, and as I'm going through, save that into my profile. So that's good. And if I also go in here, a bit like the perimeter measurement, if I give that a depth, then the software knows that it can also calculate volumes, because obviously, area multiplied by depth equals volume. The other thing I can do, though, is if I was measuring off a roof or a sloped ceiling, when I measure it here, I'm not going to actually get an actual real understanding of the actual area of material, because it's on a slope and I'm looking at it in plan view. If I change the angle there, you'll note that the area actually changed quite a bit as I changed the angle, and that's because obviously when I change the angle, the software is actually recalculating the area, the face area, based on the fact that there's actually an angle on the object that's being measured. Okay, so let's just look at something else, though. Now, if I was working out the area of a fairly complex shape, this isn't super complex, but if I wanted to try and go and use the area tools manually, that could be quite a painstaking process. So one of the really cool things here is this dynamic fill tool. So what I can do is, first of all, if I want to, now if you've used Revit, you'll understand what I'm doing here a bit. But what I'm going to do is calculate the area of this ramp. But I don't want it to calculate right the way to this back part where that line is. I actually just want it to calculate up to where that dash, long dash, short dash line is. So what I can do is arbitrarily add a boundary and maybe try and actually get it straight. There you go. All right, so that's just an arbitrary point that tells the fill tool where to stop. Now, the other thing is you can come up here and pick the different area. So you've got that floor finish one I created just before. Let's reuse that one. You can see that you can pick from any area measurement there that you've already generated. So I'm now going to just use this tool to fill that up, and then when I'm happy with that, I'll hit the apply button, and you can see now that that's measured off the area. Okay. Now, apart from that, you can also use this tool to work out other things. So you can use it to work out volumes. If you've got a volume measurement, and you can also get it to work out perimeter measurements. So let's just say I wanted to work out the perimeter of skirting on this area here. I can pick that as the particular measurement I want to make, and then go to the fill. Oh, try that again. go to the fill. Whoops. This is probably an example of where you might want to change these settings. So you can see that it's sort of going a bit slower there, which makes it a bit easier to get it right. Still a little section there, so rather than just maybe going back and redoing the whole thing, which I'm going to have to anyway because I chose the wrong measurement. Try that again. Now, why didn't that pick that? Okay, let's go back. Skirting. Perfect. Okay. Don't need to add a boundary line. Let's just try this again. Oh, good at that time. Fantastic. So again, we've got that one selected, and we apply. Interesting. Not quite sure why that's happening. Let's just close out. There it is. Perfect. So it has done it. All right. So now we've got. It actually had two selected. That was what was confusing me. It actually created an area measurement and a perimeter measurement at exactly the same time. That's why I was getting a little bit confused when I was hitting the apply button. Okay, so we can see here that it's 37.218 meters. So that's, if we go to the markups list here, we can see we've got our perimeter measurements. We've got the floor finish measurements. It's all arranged there. We can change the arrangement of the way that these look based on the different criteria. Okay. Okay, so let's just keep moving on. So that's the dynamic fill tool, and I'll just minimize that. Okay, so some of the other things that we can do with the measurements is we have the ability to create a count. So let's just say, for example, I wanted to count off the amount of, let's just see, okay, switchboards. I can just go in here and measure off switchboards. And again, that creates a tally. One of the other really cool things I can do, though, is go to the visual search. And if I wanted to search for all of the toilets that were in this design, I can just go in here, go get rectangle, and then do a search. I'm not going to go through and do a really fine tooth search. It might take a little bit long. Okay, and then when it's finished, there's a few things I can do with the search results. But if I just tick them all, one of the things I can do is convert that and actually convert it into a count. There's one I've made here earlier called WC. And you can see that all those WCs that have been identified have now been added to, they've been tallied up into a count. So that's really cool. So with regards to the actual, I realize we're getting close on time here, so I'll keep going on. What I can do is I can export these reports. So I could export this as a XML file. I'll send it out as a CSV file. So when you're sending it out, you can actually control what information is included in this report. I don't have to include everything. I can also filter out information intelligently by subject. And then when I go to the output sections, there's certain things I can do here with regards to the formatting. So if I just say that I want to show all, and then there's also sorting, so I can sort by subject and by author, and then perhaps by page label. And then I'll just click OK just to very quickly show you the sort of thing that comes out. Okay, so obviously there's no organization in this. I haven't attempted to sort or filter, but that's just an idea of some of the information you can get out. If you had included formulas and so forth in there, you could actually include those custom parameters. The other thing you can do is create a PDF summary, and what I'll do is I'll actually attach this by hyperlink to my current document. So say, for example, I was at the end of the one stage of the job and I wanted to move to the next stage, say, of going from design to construction. So I can take a snapshot of all the markups up to that point. And then what that does is it actually adds those to the document. So one of the cool things here is if I click on that, that actually takes me to the appropriate markup. So you might do this when you're, as I said, at that point where you're sort of moving from one revision to the next, or one stage of the job to the next, which brings me to my next point, which is the document comparison tools. So let's just say we've received a new issue of these drawings, and we want to identify what's changed from one to another. So we can go here to compare documents. What I'm going to do is find the new revision of the documents. Sorry about that. Revision 1, there we go. Now, if I wasn't confident that those are going to line up with each other, I know they will, but if I wasn't, I can actually manually pick points and get the software to actually work out the differences in scale and locations between the different points on the plans, which is very clever. I'm just going to make sure that I'm just comparing page 1 to 1 because the pages are different between the two. I'll just click OK, and then we get this new document that gets created, which shows us the differences. So you'll note that when I zoom in there, the software very cleverly synchronizes the views. Okay. So what I could do is I could use this as a tool to identify change, which is very powerful. The other tool that I've got that allows me to identify change is sort of similar, and that's an overlay pages. So if I find the document, the new version, revision 1, okay, now you'll see that I've got sort of similar controls here. You can also align points, again, if you're not confident that they're going to be in the same scale or same position. I'll click OK. So now what I've got is the new drawing is now showing up in green. So that may also be another way of identifying what's changed. So if I am moving to a new revision, what I can do is I can open that new revision, go to my old revision, go to my markups, and export them. So I'll just export them as a BAX file, as it's called. Go to my new revision, go back here, go import, and I'll just go back to my desktop. Date. I'm looking for a BAX file. So that would be today. Yes, that's the one. Okay, so you can see that I've now actually preserved all of my markups. Okay, so very quickly, one last thing I wanted to mention is that obviously if you've got all of your sheets have the same scale, then that's fine. But occasionally you will find that you might have a detail in one particular part of a sheet that has a different scale. So Bluebeam does have provision for that. If I just go here, this is what I did before. Let's just say that's 1 to 20. So what I can do is just say, right, that's a different scale. That's 1 to 20. Click Apply. So if I zoom in on that section and just do a quick measure off on that, just to, I guess, demonstrate what I'm talking about, you can see that that's showing. Well, sorry, let's actually go back, and I'm going to lock that. So one of the things you can do is lock markups so that you don't inadvertently move them around and select them. And I'll just hold the Shift key over that text and see if I can actually get it to move. Hang on. Okay, don't worry about it then. All right, just want to show you. If I drag that over here, there you go. You can see that that's actually changed the scale. So it's actually quite clever in the sense that there you go. That will actually change depending on the scale that I've set. Okay, so what we want to do is very quickly have a look at this collaborate tool, and that's the studio sessions. So I'm just going to sign in. I'm going to sign in using my credentials. So let's do that. I'm going to create a new session. And then I'm just going to pick I'll give it a name. So I spell review. Okay. Then I can just add, now in this particular case, this is Bluebeam Sessions. There is another tool called Bluebeam Projects, which I won't be going into today, but I just want to show you the sessions one. So I've got that file now added. So Bluebeam Sessions, it basically uses it only allows you to use PDFs. Okay, now what happened there? Did that actually create it? Yes, it did. All right, beauty. Okay, so now that it's actually created that session, what I'm going to do is send an invite. Not sure why it doubled up there. Okay, so I'll just click plus, and I'm going to invite another person called Cadgroup _SC. I can send off as many invitations. I can invite up to 500 people. I can put people in groups. So what I can do is I can actually assign privileges to these people. So for example, I can give people full privileges to edit and add files, or I can set them up so that all they can do is just open up files. So there's a whole range of different privileges that you can assign. So that sends out an invite. Now I'm just going to swap to my email program. Bear with me while it's just waiting for it. Might as well do a bit of support while I'm waiting. Okay. Doesn't usually take this long. Oh, here we go. Fantastic. Okay. So what this has done is it has sent me an invite, and it's got an ID number. So you can see here, Cadgroup SC has been invited. So I'll just copy that. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to have an out-of-body experience, and I'm going to go into another copy of Review, and I'm going to sign in as Cadgroup SC. Let's hope I can remember the password. I have. Fantastic. That's a win. Okay, so I'm going to join that session that I've been invited into. I'm not going to make a new one. Now, on this end, I'm going to open up the document in the session. In this end, as the other user, I'm going to open up the same document. It just seems to be a little bit getting a bit confused there. Hang on. Oh, I see what's happened. Okay. Got a dialogue on another screen. Okay, so I just want to very quickly show you what's going to happen here. If I start adding any markups, then you're going to see that those markups instantly, or pretty much instantly, show up on this other side. If this user here starts adding in markups, then that will also be reflected to the other users in the session. So again, these people could be using Revu on an iPad. Could be using it in the office. I can also do things like filter the markups by a particular user. I can deny access if they've been a bad person. I can also chat. I just need to send some information to different people. And what I can then do at the end of the session is, if I just, I'll just leave this session as that other user. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to finish the entire session. So I can leave the session and come back to it. That means that it sits on the cloud waiting for me to reinitiate it and take it up again. But if I hit the finish session, then that will in fact close it for everybody. Then what it does is it makes a report. So I'll just click don't save files, because what it will do is it will download the files locally for you. So it saves them for you, but it also will generate a report which is a record of all the different activity that happened. So we'll just wait for it to do that. Let's close that version of instance of Revu, and you can see now that I've got this report which shows me all the information about who made the comments, what the timestamp is, and just got some funny glitches happening there with the graphics on GoToWebinar, and it'll also identify when they made it and so forth. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground there. We've hit exactly on the hour. So I'd really like to thank everybody for attending. I appreciate that time is precious. So I'd like to thank you all for taking the time to have a listen. And as I said at the start, this is being recorded. So if you want to, you can get hold of a link for the webinar, and I'll also be publishing that up onto YouTube so that you can watch it again at your leisure. So thank you very much, and I'll close everything up for now, and I'll let you get back to your day.